behalf of the House Democratic Caucus, I want to thank you all for being here today for our weekly press availability. Today, though, we have a slightly different message than what we've had the last few weeks. Matter of fact, it's a different message than we've had for my entire 10 years here at the state capitol. For the first time in state history, we have concluded 1/4 of the legislative session, and not one member of the Democratic Party in the State House of Representatives has had a bill placed on the floor calendar, let alone even heard on the House of Representatives floor. This is unquestionably the most partisan speakership and leadership of the House of Representatives in state history. Year after year, by the time we come to the end of a committee deadline week, we have had multiple bills from the minority party, whether it was when the Democrats were in control, allowing Republican bills to be placed on the floor, and certainly since those of us who have been here in the minority as a member of the Democratic Caucus, annually we've had bills placed on the floor calendar that do great things that our caucus and our constituents need to be done, and they're advanced without the partisan rancor that we see today. But for the first time in state history, not one member of the minority party has had a bill placed on the floor calendar to be heard on the floor, period. And it's not like these are pieces of legislation that are controversial. Most of the bills, over 40 bills with Democratic Caucus House authors' names on them, passed out unanimously. They're pieces of legislation that would do things like expand coverage for the working poor. They would offer up relief to disaster victims in Oklahoma. They would roll back mandates on our public schools. They would offer up more transparency for charter schools, and they would assist women who've been victims of domestic violence, just to name a few. All of these bills received overwhelmingly bipartisan support in committee, and for the last 4 weeks, our caucuses worked hand in hand in bipartisan fashion to work with the governor and to work with the speaker to advance things like criminal justice reform and many others, not trying to be obstructionists, just trying to simply help the process. But for the first time ever, this speaker, this floor leader, have decided that apparently the 1.1 million Oklahomans that we represent shouldn't have a voice in the legislative process. And that is an absolute travesty. And so my caucus is sending the warning out today that we will not let our citizens' voices be silenced, that if the majority party and the speaker refuse to allow our legislation to come to the floor like it's been done by every speaker in the last 100 years since statehood, regardless of political party, if they refuse to change their ways, our caucus will do everything possible to force their hand starting next week and the week after. It is unconscionable for the leadership to continue to act in the way they have. It is unprecedented, and it is really a shame that partisanship that the majority party would be so partisan at a time in which bipartisanship is needed more than ever to close a $1.3 billion budget hole, to find solutions to criminal justice reform, to find solutions to help our children in the public schools. But instead of working with us, as we have done with them, they simply shut our opportunities to have our voices heard down. And so let it be known that our caucus will no longer stand for it. We recognize it, our constituents recognize it, and we are calling on the Speaker, the Pro Tem, the Majority Floor Leader to immediately place our bills on the floor calendar so that they can be heard starting next week. And if they choose not to do that, then there will be repercussions met on the House floor for their overwhelmingly partisan decision.
What are those repercussions going to be?
We will use everything within our power legislatively and procedurally to ensure that our bills are heard. And if they choose to not hear our bills, then we will use the legislative abilities within our control to essentially force their hand. They have a lot of pieces of legislation that they want to get heard, and many of those bills have been supported by our members, and we're willing to help them there. But if they choose to act in this way, we will use the procedural tools at our disposal to force their hand. Well, there are procedural motions. We have the opportunity to question multiple pieces of legislation, to debate however we want to do it, to essentially slow the process down and say if they think our bills aren't worthy of being heard, then apparently we're going to show them the same courtesy. We've done nothing but be cordial and polite and courteous to them these first 4 weeks. We've not fought them on the floor unnecessarily. As a matter of fact, we've only debated, I believe, 2 bills in the entire first 4 weeks of session. And so we've been acting in a good bipartisan manner to try to accomplish the things that are important for the state at a time in which bipartisanship is needed more than ever. What they've done is simply ignore our caucus, ignore our constituents, and act in a way that truly is unprecedented. No speaker and floor leader have ever, in the history of the state of Oklahoma, been so partisan and never let one bill out in the first quarter of the legislative session.
What's the number? You didn't get anything heard in committee or reported out of committee?
No, we've had over.
Not even heard?
We've had over 40 bills. Our caucus filed a little over 200 bills this session. The 30 of us did. Of those, over 40 of them have been passed out of committee, many of them receiving unanimous votes with no opposition whatsoever. But not one of them has even been scheduled to be heard, let alone put on the floor. And that has never happened in state history. And at a time in which we've gone to the governor and said, we want to help you with the budget crisis, we offered up plans in terms of accepting federal dollars for our hospitals to keep them open, in terms of working with the Senate Republicans like Senator Mazie and working in a bipartisan manner to roll back the income tax cut that was fiscally irresponsible, in terms of indexing the gross production tax to the price of oil. Those are things that we're offering in our negotiations with the governor and the speaker. They want us to simply come in and raise taxes on middle-class families. We've told them we will not stand by and watch our families have their taxes increase at the same time that oil and gas and wealthy folks in Oklahoma have their taxes cut. And so in order to negotiate, we've offered up in good faith to say we will work with you on the issues that are important to you if you'll work with us on the issues that are important to the people of Oklahoma as we see them. And they've chosen not to. Matter of fact, the governor simply come out and said she will not negotiate on things like the income tax cut, even though there's bipartisan support to do it. The partisanship is really, really unbelievable at a time in which we desperately need bipartisanship.
Excuse my ignorance. The rules and procedures all start to blur after a few years for me. Those 40, is there any procedural impediment to getting them scheduled? Or
No.
Do they have to be scheduled by the end of this week?
No.
So the
Sure.
Pro Tem and the Speaker can make a decision.
Absolutely. They need to be, those bills must be put on the floor calendar by sometime next week so that we can have them heard either next week or the following week. We have 2 weeks left to have our bills heard on the floor along with the Republicans, bills that have passed out of committee. And as I said, this is the first time in state history that a speaker and his team have been so partisan to completely exclude any member of the minority party. No Democratic speaker ever did that to the Republican minority, and no Republican speaker has ever done that to the Democratic minority until this week.
Do you have a number of bills? Do you have a guesstimate of how many Republican bills the idea has been transferred to a different author?
No. Yeah. None of those. That has not happened, except maybe in one. And in that instance that I'm thinking about on the internet sales tax, that bill didn't even get heard. That bill didn't pass out of committee with our author's name on it. So no, to say the least, the over 40 bills that have passed out with the Democratic House authors, they haven't been co-opted into other legislation.
Committee support from Republicans.
Overwhelming committee support.
You said your bills are not controversial, the ones that are not being heard, but those sound like really controversial topics right now.
Sure.
Maybe rolling back the income tax cut.
Well, that hadn't passed out, and that's not what the issues that we're trying to negotiate on in order to balance the budget and move Oklahoma out of this hole are somewhat more controversial, and that's only because the Republicans make them so. Rolling back the income tax cut has bipartisan support. Maintaining the income tax cut in a fiscally irresponsible way has only got support from Republicans in this legislature. They don't have support from Republican voters. They don't have support from they don't have broad-based support from Republican senators. They're with us on that issue. The only people who are being partisan in this issue when it comes to the budget and our legislation is the governor and the leadership in the House of Representatives. When you look at things like rolling back some of the mandates on public education, Representative Ed Kennedy's got a bill that is supported by the superintendent, that is supported by even Jason Nelson, he and Representative Kennedy have been on opposite sides of education issues for years, but it would move the ball forward on the teacher leader effectiveness issue. It passed out 15-0. Educators want it. Jason Nelson supported it, and we can't get that bill on the floor. Not because they disagree with it, it's because they choose to be partisan and shut us out for some reason that is unbeknownst to us.
Scott, you're talking about putting bills on a calendar, which is kind of is not a very, it's kind of sort of a passive thing. Do you feel any sort of active partisanship from leadership? Have any of your members had conversations with the floor leader or the speaker about your bills?
We have. Many of our members have gone to other members of the majority party and said, "What's going on? Why aren't our bills being put on the calendar and then put on the floor, like has happened for the last 10 years that I've been here, for the 12 years that Representative McPeak and Representative Shelton have been here? That's the way it's always worked." And so the word we're getting back from us is that they're displeased with our position on the budget. They apparently don't want to roll back the income tax. They apparently don't want to bring in Medicaid dollars or bring our federal dollars home. And so they're frustrated because we told them if they won't negotiate in good faith on those issues, why would we ever raise taxes on middle-class families? And apparently because of that position, our refusal to raise taxes on middle-class families, they've decided to make sure that our legislation won't get heard on the House floor. And that is, it is. It's absolutely repugnant, and it is partisanship at its worst, and it is everything about politics that people back home despise. They send us up here to work together. We've done that. We've passed out controversial criminal justice reform, for example, that the governor wanted. We could have obstructed. We didn't. We said we're going to get it passed. We helped them do that, and we're going to help them on the floor. We haven't been obstructionists on the floor. We've been working with them hand in hand. But unfortunately, this leadership has decided to dig their heels in and do something that has never been done by a speaker and their leadership team in the history of the state of Oklahoma until today.
Specifically,
Go ahead.
Specifically, though, what will have the Democratic caucus sort of pull their foot off the brakes? If you hear one bill on the floor.
No. So basically, we're looking for fairness in the process. If they respect us, we understand that every bill that they get out of committee doesn't necessarily get heard on the floor. We respect that. We also understand that every bill that comes out of committee with our names on it may not necessarily get heard on the floor. But our basic understanding is this: if 80 or 85% of their bills that come out of committee with overwhelming support get heard on the floor, there's no reason that 80 to 85% of our bills that come out of committee with overwhelming support shouldn't be heard as well. That's just acting in good faith. That's the way it's always been until today. And the reason that we're understanding that they're doing that is because we won't raise taxes on middle-class families. They want to do it. They don't want to roll back the income tax cut. They don't want to do the Medicaid expansion. They don't want to do the gross production tax. They just simply want to raise taxes on middle-class families. And because our caucus has put our foot down and said, no, we will not do that until you negotiate in good faith on the issues that really got us here, right? The lack of a cigarette tax and an internet tax isn't what put us here. Their decisions to cut $1 billion worth of income taxes and their decisions to give money away to the oil and gas industry are what put us here. They refuse to address those issues and instead want to raise taxes on our families. We won't do it. And we want to negotiate in good faith, but right now they're not. The good faith that we've shown them is to work in a bipartisan manner. What they've shown us is to completely ignore our constituents and legislation that otherwise is full support of the caucus.
It would amplify your message if we could have, is this possible, probably Mike, because everything rolls downhill, to actually get a listing so that we could inform readers of, here's the kind of, and people can decide one by one. Well, I sure don't want that 15% to come up.
Sure. No, absolutely. Matter of fact, our policy director, Jackie Walsh, has got a list of those. And listen, if past is prologue, we've trained Representative McPeak, our caucus chairman, Representative Shelton, one of our assistant Democratic floor leaders. We've trained some of the newer members in the team to understand. We get it. If the Republican majority allows a bill to be heard in committee, and they actually pass that out overwhelming with bipartisan support, it's not really controversial. If it was really controversial, they'd kill those bills, right? So we're talking about legislation that's important to us and important to our constituents, but by its very nature, isn't overwhelmingly controversial. If it were, they would not have heard it in committee, and if they would have defeated it, right? So these are bills that have received broad-based bipartisan support, and the only reason they're not being heard and passed off the floor is because of a partisan agenda that's standing in the way. And make no mistake about it, if that's how they want to act when it comes to things like rolling back teacher mandates or protecting public workers' rights or protecting domestic violence victims, then how are they going to get when they have to roll out a budget and they're going to ask us to support a budget that's going to cut, that'll be the worst budget in the history of the state of Oklahoma, in a generation for teachers and public employees and hospitals. If they need our support, which they do, then they need to work in good conscience and good faith, which is what we've done with them. Unfortunately, a quarter of the legislative session has gone by, and this leadership continues to act in partisan ways that are unprecedented.
Finish that sentence. If they need our support, comma.
If they need our support, then they need to work with us in the same bipartisan, good faith manner in which we've worked with them.
Thanks.
Do you think your caucus will stop showing up for legislative sessions?
No. No, our constituents pay our salary to come here and fight for them and work for them. We will be here every day, and in that process, we will ensure that everybody back home, like we're doing today, everybody back home will know at a time in which everyone should work together. Our caucus is here, shows up every day to do what's right. We've worked with them in a bipartisan manner to this point, and we will continue to do that. But we ask that they do the same for us, and we ask that they answer to the public as to why they think they can ignore the will of 1.1 million Oklahomans, and they're not all just 1.1 million Democrats. Each of us represents Democrats, Republicans, and Independents who sent us here to do the job for them. These bills that we filed and have passed out of committee are doing their wishes, and we're being stonewalled so that the leadership can grind up partisan acts. And And while there's always those dust-ups between Democrats and Republicans in every legislative body in the country, this has never happened before, ever. What the Republican majority is doing today is completely ignoring reality. Right now you have teachers who desperately need more money, and instead of offering a solution to find them more money, they offer up a solution to take money out of their health care benefits, literally robbing Peter to pay Peter. Instead of finding a way to put more money in the classroom, they offer up a voucher bill that will take more money out of the classroom. And instead of finding a way to save hospitals like the one in Sayre, which is closed, and that combined with the 7 other hospitals in Oklahoma that have filed for bankruptcy since 2010, instead of finding a solution to help them, they simply offer up solutions that will only hurt them further, like what Dr. Cox did this week, passing out a bill in appropriations and budget that would push 110,000 people off the Medicaid rolls, which would only increase the burden on our rural hospitals who already have to care for those folks who are uninsured. The reason hospitals in Sayre closed their doors, the reason hospitals in Veneta and LaFleur County and Grady County and other places filed for bankruptcy or on the verge of bankruptcy isn't because of Medicaid patients and Medicare patients. It's because we have too many folks who are uninsured. And the solution that the Republican majority is offering is not to find a way to get more folks insured, but it's absolutely to put more people on the rolls of the uninsured. That is unbelievable. And the people of Oklahoma, the doctors, the nurses, the patients, just people who care about the future of healthcare in Oklahoma should be outraged that the solution exists to extend coverage to more folks in Oklahoma. They choose to ignore it because of partisan reasons. They don't want to bring our federal dollars home like Governor Martinez did, Republican Governor Martinez did in New Mexico, like Republican Governor Brewer did in Arizona, like Republican Governor Kasich did in Ohio. They refuse to bring our dollars home, and they literally would rather close hospitals than stand up and do the right thing. And the people of Oklahoma need to know. They know problems exist. They hear that. But they need to know that the solutions that are being offered by the Republican majority only make those problems worse. They don't move us in the right direction.
The Hospital Association yesterday, if you've already touched on this, I apologize, but they came out with basically disguising, it sounds like Medicaid expansion by a different name. Is there any chance that you see that, I mean, as you indicated, with rural hospitals closing, is there any chance that's get any traction at all?
You know, I'm not optimistic. I've met with the governor, I've met with Secretary Dorflinger, and I've met with the speaker and others, and I've told them our caucus for our constituents, it's not a political, it's for our constituents, desperately wants to find a way to bring our federal dollars home. And at one point, we were looking for just simply a straight expansion. If the governor doesn't want to do that, if she wants to use Insure Oklahoma or some other program, I don't care. If she wants to call it the anti-Scott Inman bill, I don't care what it is. At some point, we need to bring our dollars home to take care of our citizens. They're our uninsured folks, they're our hospitals, they're our doctors, they're our constituents, and it's our money, and we need to use it to cover them. Other states have done it. We refuse to do it, not because it's fiscally responsible, not because it would be good for the hospitals. They refuse to do it because of partisan reasons, because they're worried about the political price that they'll pay in a Republican primary in an election year. And I promise you this, my caucus members don't come up and vote on bills and oppose good faith efforts to move Oklahoma forward because they're worried about a Democratic primary. We vote on bills based upon whether they're good or bad for the people of Oklahoma, and unfortunately this Republican majority continues to look over their right shoulder, scared of their right shadow, and because of that, because of their fear of losing an election, there are people in Oklahoma who are dying because of lack of insurance, and that is a crying shame.